Let the modern world fade away. Take a deep breath, slow and easy, and for a moment, allow the weight of your day, the soft hum of your room, the small steady glow of your screen, the long list of things you carried through the hours to slip quietly into the background until there is only darkness and the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Now imagine, in your closed eyes, a coast at night. The tide is low. A wide stretch of cool, wet sand reflects a small white moon. Beyond the sand, the surf breaks in slow, patient lines. Long, low, almost reluctant waves, the kind that sound less like collision than like a long exhale. The air smells of salt and kelp and the faint mineral coldness of seaweed drying on stones. Somewhere far off, a single seabird calls once and is quiet. You're standing at the edge of this beach. You are weightless here, invisible, free to drift along the surf line at your own pace. The night is warm enough that you do not need a coat. The sea is calm enough that you can hear, if you listen carefully, the breath of something very large somewhere out beyond the breakers, rising once to take air, sinking again into the dark. Perhaps a whale, almost certainly a whale. The modern ocean still has whales. The modern ocean, in fact, still has many giants. A blue whale, the largest animal ever to have lived on Earth, can stretch 100 feet from snout to tail and weigh as much as 30 elephants. A fin whale runs almost as long. A sperm whale, smaller but more massive in the head, dives more than a mile down to hunt giant squid in the dark. A whale shark, the largest fish in the world today, drifts through warm tropical seas, filtering plankton through gill rakers wider than a doorway. A great white shark, by no means the largest ever to swim, still patrols cold coastlines with a quiet authority that nothing else quite matches. The modern ocean is not, by any honest measure, an ocean without giants. It is one of the richest moments for giant marine animals that this planet has ever known. And yet, tonight, we're going to walk slowly through the long memory of the ocean and notice how many other giants it has held and lost over deep time. We're going to meet the giant cephalopod that ruled the Ordovician seas, hundreds of millions of years before any fish became big enough to bother it. We're going to meet Dunkleosteus, the bone-headed placoderm whose jaws sheared so hard that he could have cut another fish his own size in half with a single bite. We are going to meet the sea scorpions, eurypterids longer than a tall human, walking on jointed legs across the seafloor of a world without bones to fear them. We are going to meet the ichthyosaurs of the Triassic, marine reptiles longer than blue whales, hunting in seas warmer than any modern sea. We are going to meet the great pliosaurs of the Jurassic, the gigantic mosasaurs of the late Cretaceous, the basilosaurids of the Eocene, the Megalodon shark of the Miocene and Pliocene. We are going to walk along the long, slow shoreline of marine extinction. Then, in the gentlest possible thought experiment, we are going to ask a quiet question. What if none of them had ever gone? What if every giant the ocean ever made were still here tonight, all of them sharing the same modern seas? The eurypterids in the tide pools, Dunkleosteus along the cold trenches, the ichthyosaurs in temperate waters, the mosasaurs along the warm shelves, the Megalodon in the deep open ocean, and swimming patiently among them all, the modern blue whale, still the largest of them, still singing his low songs to the dark. This is, of course, an impossible question. It is a thought experiment. It cannot really be answered. The species we will meet tonight lived in different climates, different ocean chemistries, different ecosystems, often separated by tens or hundreds of millions of years. To put them all in the same sea would not just rewrite history, it would break the rules of how oceans, climates, and species evolve over time. We are not pretending otherwise, but the imagining itself is calming. The imagining itself is the point. The sleep documentary, as a form, is built on slow walks through impossible places, places we cannot really visit, animals we cannot really meet, oceans we cannot really stand on the edge of. The imagining is what lets the daily mind let go. The imagining is what gives the body permission to sleep. So tonight, we're going to walk through the long history of the ocean's giants and then briefly, gently, lift ourselves into the gentlest of imagined worlds, a modern ocean that never lost any of them. We will not stay there long. We will not pretend it is real. We will simply visit and breathe and let the strangeness of it carry us into deeper rest. This will be a long walk. The ocean has been making and losing giants for more than 500 million years. We have a lot of seafloor to cover. There is no urgency tonight. The tide is low, the sea is patient. The walk is at the pace of slow surf. If your eyes close along the way, that is perfectly all right. The world will still be here, breathing in long, slow waves when you return. Before we walk back along the long beach of deep time, we're going to sit for a while with a single, slow moment in the modern ocean. A moment that has nothing to do with ancient giants, and yet has everything to do with them. Imagine, 3,000 miles west of any coast, somewhere over the deep abyssal plain of the North Pacific, a single blue whale is dying. She's an old female, 98 years old, more than 100 feet long, weighing close to 200 tons. She has migrated between Antarctic feeding grounds and tropical breeding waters every year of her long life. She has raised 7 calves. She has crossed the Pacific dozens of times. She has known the songs of perhaps 200 other blue whales across the decades. She's one of the oldest living things in the ocean. Tonight, in our slow imagining, she's at the end. There is no single cause. Her body has simply aged out. Her metabolism is slowing. Her last calf, born 9 years ago, is long since independent. She's not eaten well in several weeks. She's been swimming more slowly, surfacing less often, breathing in shallower rhythms. Now, in deep water above the abyssal plain, she rolls slowly onto her side. She takes one last long breath at the surface, a slow exhale through her twin blowholes that scatters a fine spray of warm vapour into the cold Pacific air. Then she dips beneath the surface for the final time, and she does not come back up. Her body sinks slowly. The ocean here is more than 2 miles deep, perhaps 3 miles in places. Her descent will take many hours. She is heavier in death than in life, because she has stopped breathing and the air that was in her lungs is leaking out. She rolls in the slow currents as she falls. Above her, the sunlit upper waters fade. Around her, the water darkens through clear blue, through deep cobalt, through indigo, into the absolute black of the abyssal zone. She passes through the twilight zone, where bioluminescent fish flicker faintly in the gloom. Several of them sense her descent and follow her down for a time, drawn by the chemical traces of her dying body. But they cannot keep up. She is too large, too dense, falling too steadily. They peel off and return to their own depths. She passes the 1,000-foot mark. The water is now near freezing. The pressure has compressed her body, squeezing the residual air out of her lungs, flattening the softer tissues against her great rib cage. Her skin, in the dark, no longer looks blue. It looks dark grey, almost black. She passes the 5,000-foot mark. The pressure is now more than 150 times atmospheric. Nothing about her body has been adapted for this depth. She is not a deep diver in life. Blue whales feed in the upper few hundred feet where the krill swarm. Her descent into the abyss is happening because she is dead, not because she has chosen to dive. The water around her is utterly black. There is no light. There has not been light for many hours. She passes the 8,000-foot mark. The current here is slow and steady, a long deep flow that has been moving through this part of the Pacific for thousands of years, since the cold water sank in the high North Atlantic and made its long, slow journey across the ocean basins. Around 14,000 feet, she finally touches the seafloor. The touch is gentle. There is no crash. There is no sudden impact. She settles softly into a thin layer of fine biological silt. The accumulated dust of plankton remains that have fallen, particle by particle, over thousands of years. Her great body sinks slightly into the silt, raising a slow cloud that drifts away in the deep current. She comes to rest on her side, her fluke splayed out behind her, her flippers folded against her flanks, her great head facing toward a slope of basalt that rises a few hundred feet from the abyssal plain. For perhaps the first few hours nothing happens, the deep is silent, the body is alone. Then slowly the first scavengers arrive. The chemical signals of a dying whale travel surprisingly far in the deep sea. The currents carry traces of her decomposing body for miles in every direction. Within hours, the first sleeper sharks begin to converge. They are big, slow animals, 12 to 20 feet long, dark and patient. They live in the cold, deep waters of the Pacific year-round. They have been waiting, in some quiet sense, for exactly this kind of meal. A whale carcass is the largest single food source they will ever encounter. The sleeper sharks arrive in ones and twos over the course of the first day. By the second day, there are perhaps a dozen. They tear strips of flesh from her flanks, working slowly, methodically, with no urgency. There is enough meat here to feed every sleeper shark in this region for months. Smaller scavengers arrive too. Hagfish, those primitive jawless fish with their soft, slimy bodies, slip into the spaces between her ribs and along her belly. They produce vast clouds of slime to ward off the larger sharks and to make themselves harder to grab. They eat from the inside out, burrowing through soft tissue, eating their way through her body cavity. They are not pretty, they are extremely effective. Deep-sea crabs arrive. Some are pale and spider-like, with long, thin legs and small bodies. Others are stouter, more like modern shore crabs but blanched by the dark. They pick at smaller bits of flesh that the sharks and hagfish have loosened. Over the first month, the sharks and hagfish and crabs work the body down through what paleontologists call the mobile scavenger stage. By the end of the month, most of the soft tissue is gone. The skin and blubber and muscle have been consumed. What remains is mostly bone, with some connective tissue still attached, lying on the sediment in roughly her original shape, but stripped, gleaming faintly white in the dim light of the rare deep-sea bioluminescence that occasionally passes by. Then the second stage begins, the enrichment opportunist stage. Now the slower colonizers arrive. Polychaete worms, the segmented worms of the deep, settle on the bones and in the sediment around her. They feed on the small amounts of soft tissue still embedded in the bones and on the rich organic material that is soaked into the sediment around her body. Their populations explode. The seafloor around the whale becomes a small, dense city of worms, perhaps thousands of individuals in each square foot of sediment. Other animals arrive too, snails that feed on the worms, small crustaceans, sea stars that pick at decaying tissue. The whole community is fed, directly or indirectly, by the energy that this single blue whale brought down with her from the surface waters where she fed. This stage lasts perhaps 2 years. Then the third stage begins, the sulfophilic stage, the chemoautotrophic stage, the slow, deep, quiet work of the bones themselves. Whale bones are unusually rich in oils, particularly in the bones of large baleen whales like our blue. These oils, locked inside the bone matrix, slowly leach out into the sediment over years. As they do, they support a community of bacteria that can metabolize sulfur compounds, much like the bacteria that live around deep-sea hydrothermal vents. The sulfur bacteria in turn support a whole different community of larger animals, tube worms, mussels, clams, that have evolved to live on sulfide-rich substrates. The whale fall at this stage becomes its own small island of life on the otherwise sparse abyssal plain. It is connected, in chemistry and in ecology, to the great hydrothermal vent communities that live on the mid-ocean ridges. It is its own world, supported by the slow decomposition of bone and oil. This stage lasts decades, in some cases 50 years, in some cases perhaps 100. The bones of our blue whale lying on the dark seafloor in the central Pacific will be feeding deep-sea communities long after every human who has ever heard of her is dead. Eventually, even the bones are consumed. The bone-eating Osedax worms, a relatively recently discovered group of marine annelids, secrete acid that dissolves the bone matrix and exposes the organic material inside. They eat the bones themselves. Across many decades, they reduce the great whale skeleton to nothing. By the end of the process, perhaps 100 years after our blue whale's death, almost nothing remains. A faint enrichment in the sediment, a few mineralized fragments, a small patch of slightly different chemistry on the abyssal plain. The community of life she supported has moved on. The next whale fall, somewhere else, will support a similar community for another long stretch. Take a deep breath. The whale fall is one of the slow, patient marvels of the modern deep sea. It is also a reminder of something this episode is quietly about. The ocean has been receiving the bodies of its giants for a very long time, and it has always known what to do with them. Every dead giant becomes 1,000 smaller lives. This is not a new pattern. It is in some ways the oldest pattern in the sea. When the great pliosaurs died in the Jurassic and sank to the seafloor of the deep Tethys, their bodies fed similar communities, although different in detail. When the great ichthyosaurs died in the Triassic seas, their bones became islands of life on the Mesozoic abyssal plain. When the great Megalodon sharks died in the Miocene, their cartilage and teeth dissolved more quickly than whale bones, but their flesh fed deep-sea scavengers for weeks. The deep ocean has been quietly composting its giants for hundreds of millions of years. Our blue whale, in this sense, is the latest entry in a very long, very patient ledger. The communities that gather around her bones tonight are the lineal descendants of communities that gathered around dead ichthyosaurs in the Triassic and dead mosasaurs in the Cretaceous. The deep sea has not forgotten the giants. It has, in some literal way, eaten them all and used them to build the next thing. We're going to leave our blue whale resting in the abyssal silt. Her body will, across the next century, slowly disappear. Her energy will move into worms and bacteria and crabs and sleeper sharks. Some of that energy will eventually make its way back up the food chain, into smaller fish, into larger fish, into the next generation of marine giants whose lives will, in time, also end and sink, and the cycle will continue. Tonight, in our walk together, we're going to follow this same long ledger backward in time, into the deep memory of the sea. We're going to meet every giant the ocean has produced, all the way back to the small 2-foot Anomalocaris of the Cambrian. We're going to honour them all, let your breath slow. The blue whale is settled. The deep is patient. We begin where every story of the ocean begins, with water. The first oceans on Earth formed nearly 4 billion years ago, as the young planet cooled enough to allow liquid water to settle on its surface. For more than 3 billion years after that, the seas were the only place where life existed. Bacteria, archaea, simple single-celled organisms, eventually small multicellular things. The land was bare rock, exposed to a raw atmosphere with no oxygen and no soil. Nothing lived on land. Everything lived in the water. Across this immense early stretch, the ocean produced no giants. Life stayed small. The largest organisms were perhaps the size of a coin. Most were microscopic. The ocean was vast and rich, but its inhabitants were modest. Then, around 540 million years ago, in what scientists call the Cambrian explosion, the world's seas burst into a sudden diversity of animal body plans. Within a few tens of millions of years, almost every major animal group that exists today had its first ancestors swimming, crawling, or burrowing through Cambrian sediments. There were trilobites, arthropods with segmented bodies and many legs. There were brachiopods, shelled invertebrates that anchored themselves to the seafloor. There were the first chordates, the long ancestral line that includes you. There were strange creatures whose body plans no longer have any modern equivalents. Hallucigenia with its rows of spines, Opabinia with its 5 eyes, were waxier with its strange covering of scales and spikes, and there were the first giants. The largest Cambrian predator we know was Anomalocaris, a strange swimming arthropod with two grasping appendages at the front of its head and a wide segmented body propelled by paddle-shaped flaps along its sides. He's not particularly large by any modern standard. The biggest Anomalocaris specimens are about 2 feet long, but in a Cambrian sea, where most other animals were measured in inches, Anomalocaris was the apex predator. He was the largest hunter the planet had ever produced. He was the first giant of the ocean. Imagine standing on a Cambrian beach, 520 million years ago. There is no land vegetation. The continents are bare rock, soft red and yellow under a sky that is paler than yours, with carbon dioxide levels several times higher than the modern atmosphere. The shoreline is dotted with small slimy mats of cyanobacteria, the descendants of the microbes that have been pumping oxygen into the air for billions of years. The water itself is warm and shallow and alive. You wade out into the shallows. The water is up to your knees. The sand under your feet is rippled by the slow Cambrian tide. Around your ankles, small trilobites are moving across the bottom, their segmented backs glittering in the sun. A small fish-shaped chordate, perhaps Pikaia or one of his relatives, flicks past. He is no larger than your little finger. He is one of your very, very distant ancestors, although he does not know it. Out beyond the wading depth, a shape moves through the deeper water. It is long and segmented with paddle-shaped flaps along its sides and two strange, spiky arms held forward in front of its head. It is Anomalocaris. He is hunting. The trilobites at your feet sense him and burrow into the sand. The small chordates dart for cover. Anomalocaris does not chase them. He is too large for them anyway. He is looking for larger trilobites, the kinds that grow to a hand's width, the kinds that take time to crack open. He passes within a few yards of you. You can see his strange face. The two large compound eyes mounted on stalks, the circular mouth ringed with hard plates designed to crush trilobite shells, the long flexible body undulating slowly through the water. He is the largest animal you have ever seen in person, if you allow yourself to be in the Cambrian shallows. He is 2 feet long, perhaps slightly more. In your modern world, he would be smaller than many house cats. The water around your knees is warmer than you expected. There is a strange softness to it, a thickness that has nothing to do with temperature. It is the texture of a sea that has not yet produced fish in any abundance, of a sea where the food web is still mostly invertebrate, of a sea where the largest predator is the size of a house cat, and the smallest organisms are bacteria invisible to your eyes. Particles drift in the water, tiny single-celled plankton, fragments of shed trilobite shells, soft floating bits of organic matter. You can almost see the light scattering off them in the warm, low sun. The shoreline behind you is, in its own way, completely unfamiliar. There is no grass. There are no trees. There are no birds. The land above the high tide mark is bare rock and sand and clay, with occasional dark patches where cyanobacterial mats have spread across damp ground. There is no terrestrial life of any kind, beyond bacteria and perhaps the very first small primitive plants and fungi creeping across the wettest stones. The Cambrian land is empty. The Cambrian sea is full, but full does not yet mean large. Most things in the water around you are smaller than your hand. Most things on the seafloor are smaller than your thumbnail. The Cambrian is the time of small. Anomalocaris, at 2 feet long, is the exception that proves the rule, but he is the king of his sea. The Cambrian Ocean has nothing bigger. Anomalocaris is the giant of his moment. He is also a glimpse of a pattern that will repeat itself over and over again across the next 500 million years. The ocean grows a giant. The giant rules for a while. Then the giant goes extinct, and a new lineage rises into the empty niche, often becoming larger than the one before. The Cambrian giants are followed by larger Ordovician giants. The Ordovician giants are followed by larger Devonian giants. and so on across geological time. The maximum size of marine predators creeps upward. There are setbacks, of course. Mass extinctions reset the rules. But the long trajectory is, on average, toward greater size. This is not random. There are real biological reasons for it. Larger bodies hold heat better. Larger bodies digest food more efficiently. Larger bodies can swim further on a single meal. Larger bodies can swallow larger prey, which means they can specialize in hunting other large bodies. The ocean rewards size in many ways. It also punishes size. Larger animals reproduce more slowly. They need more food. They are more vulnerable to climate shifts that cut into their food supply. They take longer to recover after a mass extinction. So the ocean grows giants, then loses them, then grows them again. The giants come and go. Tonight, we are going to walk along that long line of coming and going. We are going to meet each generation of ocean giants in turn, see what made them giant, and see what eventually ended them. Let the modern world fade away. The Cambrian shore has slipped behind us. We're walking forward along the long sandy beach of deep time, our bare feet leaving soft prints in the wet ground. Each step is a few million years. The sun above us is the same sun, but the sky is changing. The continents in the distance are slowly drifting into new arrangements. The water is rising and falling with each ice age, each greenhouse interval, each tectonic upheaval. We have walked from the Cambrian into the Ordovician. The world is now around 470 million years ago. The continents are mostly clustered in the southern hemisphere. A great supercontinent called Gondwana stretches across the southern polar regions. The northern continents are smaller, scattered. The shallow seas between them are warm and full of life. In these shallow seas, the diversity of marine animals has continued to grow. The trilobites have diversified into hundreds of species. The brachiopods are covering the seafloor in vast beds. The first reefs, built by extinct early sponges and stromatoporoids, and the first corals are rising in the warm waters of the tropics. The first jawless fish, small and armoured and slow, are picking their way along the bottom, ancestors of the long line that will eventually lead to all modern vertebrates. And the giants have grown. The Ordovician's apex predator is no longer Anomalocaris. Anomalocaris and most of his strange Cambrian relatives are gone, extinct in one of the smaller end Cambrian die-offs. In their place, a new lineage has risen, the nautiloids. They are cephalopods, related to the modern nautilus, the squid, the octopus. The earlier cephalopods evolved in the late Cambrian as small-shelled mollusks. By the Ordovician, they have diversified into many forms, and some of them have grown enormous. The largest is Cameroceras. He is a giant orthoconic nautiloid, a cephalopod with a long, straight cone-shaped shell, pointed at one end, with the animal itself living at the open end. From the open end of his shell protrudes a head with large eyes and a ring of grasping tentacles. He pulls himself through the water by squirting jets of water from a siphon, much like a modern squid, although more slowly. His shell can grow more than 20 feet long. Some estimates push the larger specimens past 30 feet. He is the first true giant the ocean has produced. He is the size of a small bus. Imagine standing in the shallows of an Ordovician reef. The water is warm and clear. Around you, in the gentle current, vast brachiopod beds carpet the seafloor. Tabulate corals build low pavements of interlocking polygonal cells. Crinoids, the so-called sea lilies, wave their feathery arms in the current. A few trilobites pick their way along the sand. In the deeper water, perhaps 30 feet beyond the reef edge, you see him. A long pale shape, almost cylindrical, drifting at the boundary between sunlit shallows and shadowy deep. The cone of his shell points away from you. The open end faces forward, where his eyes and tentacles probe the water. He is hunting. He's looking for unwary trilobites or smaller cephalopods or the first armoured fish. He is patient. He moves slowly. He does not need to rush. There is nothing in this ocean fast enough or large enough to threaten him. He is the apex. For perhaps 50 million years, the Cameroceras and his giant orthoconic relatives are the largest predators on the planet. They dominate the warm reef margins of the Ordovician and Silurian seas. They are, in their long patient way, the first true ocean giants in the modern sense, large enough that a human would feel small beside them, large enough that the rest of the ecosystem visibly orbits around them. Then, slowly, they decline. The reasons are complex. Their cousins, the more modern coiled shell cephalopods, the ancestors of modern nautiluses and ammonites, are more agile in the water. Their straight-shelled body plan is awkward for fast manoeuvring. The rise of armoured fish in the Silurian and Devonian also pressures them. The new fish are predators in their own right, and they hunt small cephalopods, slowly thinning the prey base of the giants. By the late Devonian, the giant orthoconic nautiloids have shrunk to modest sizes. By the end of the Paleozoic, they are gone entirely. Their long cone-shaped shells survive in fossil beds across what was once the Ordovician and Silurian tropical sea, in Estonia, in Sweden, in the central United States, in China. Some of the largest fossils, more than 20 feet long, are display pieces in major natural history museums. They are quiet reminders that the ocean once had giants made of shell. We walk on. The shore curves slightly. The sky above us has continued to change. The Silurian has slipped into the Devonian. The world is now around 400 million years ago. The supercontinent Gondwana is moving north. The smaller northern continents are colliding to form Euramerica. The first true forests are spreading inland, where simple ferns and primitive trees have begun to colonize the previously bare land. The atmosphere is enriching with more oxygen. The seas, fed by nutrient runoff from new land vegetation, are richer than ever, and the giants have grown again. In the Devonian seas, two new lineages of giants emerge. The first is the eurypterids, the sea scorpions. They are arthropods, distant cousins of modern horseshoe crabs and spiders. They have segmented bodies, jointed legs, and long curved tails that end in spike-like telsons. The largest eurypterids are absolutely enormous by arthropod standards. Jaekelopterus rhenaniae, from the early Devonian of what is now Germany, is the largest arthropod ever to have lived, nearly 9 feet long. He is longer than a tall human. He has grasping claws at the front of his face that can be more than a foot across. He is, by any honest measure, a monster. He hunts at the bottom of warm Devonian estuaries, his many legs scrabbling through the soft mud, his tail braced behind him. He is looking for the small armoured fish that have started to spread across these waters, the first jawed fish, called placoderms. He is also a cannibal. He will eat smaller eurypterids when he finds them. He is also, by his own measure, a king. There is nothing in these brackish waters that can hurt him. He is the largest predator of his habitat. He is, in the way of all such predators, slow and patient and utterly confident. Imagine wading into the warm, shallow water of a Devonian estuary. The bottom is muddy and dark. The water is cloudy with sediment. Around you, in the dimness, small armoured fish dart in panicked flickers. They have sensed something. You have not sensed it yet. Then, slowly, a long dark shape emerges from the mud, perhaps 15 feet ahead of you. A segmented body the size of a small alligator, but flatter, more lobster-like in build, with 2 enormous chelate claws at the front. He lifts his head out of the mud. His many eyes catch the dim light. He stands tall and segmented and impossibly strange. You back away. You do not wade further. Eurypterids of his size could probably bite through an unarmoured human thigh. You do not test this hypothesis. The eurypterids are not just monstrous in size, they're also in a quiet way beautiful. Their segmented backs catch the light in dark iridescent panels. Their long tails sweep behind them in slow, elegant lines. They are like jewels of armour, walking through the dim Devonian shallows. They're also social in their own quiet way. Some species form loose aggregations in the breeding season, dozens of large individuals converging on shallow inlets, where the females molt their old exoskeletons and the males approach them carefully, claws raised in slow ritualized display. The molting itself is a vulnerable moment. A freshly molted eurypterid is soft, almost helpless, until her new shell hardens over the next several days. The aggregations are partly mating events and partly mutual protection. Many large bodies in shallow water are safer than one alone. These aggregations leave their mark on the fossil record. Some sites in what is now upstate New York, in the Bertie group of Silurian and Devonian eurypterid beds, preserve dozens of articulated eurypterid skeletons stacked together, the records of a single mass molt that ended badly when the lagoon became anoxic, or when storm sediment buried the helpless soft-bodied animals before their new shells could harden. The bodies lie now in dark limestone slabs, jewel-armoured even in death, the small details of their compound eyes and segmented backs preserved with extraordinary clarity. Walking among the late Devonian giant eurypterids would have been like walking among large dogs that had been engineered for water, alert, segmented, careful, often gentle with each other and devastating with their prey. They are the longest invertebrates the planet has ever produced. They are also, in the long run, doomed. The fish that they have been eating are evolving rapidly. The placoderms are appearing. The smaller, more agile cartilaginous fish, the first sharks, are spreading across the same waters. Within 50 million years of the eurypterid's peak, the fish will overtake them as the dominant marine vertebrate predators, and the giant eurypterids will start their long, slow decline toward extinction. The other great Devonian giant is something else entirely. He is Dunkleosteus torelli, an arthrodire placoderm, one of the first lineages of jawed fish to truly take advantage of having jaws. He has no teeth. He has instead two pairs of hard, sharp-edged bony plates lining his upper and lower jaws, set in a self-sharpening arrangement. Every time his jaws close, the plates grind against each other and sharpen themselves. He has the most powerful bite of any animal then alive on Earth. He is built like a torpedo with an armoured face. He is also enormous. The largest Dunkleosteus specimens are estimated at 20 feet long, possibly more, with body weights over a ton. He is one of the most fearsome predators the ocean has ever produced. He can shear another large fish in half with a single bite. He hunts other placoderms, the larger eurypterids when he can catch them, and almost anything else that swims or floats in his sea. Imagine standing on a Devonian beach. The water is clear and warm. Beyond the shallows in deeper water, a long, armoured shape glides slowly through the blue. He is silver above and pale below, the classic counter-shading of a pelagic predator. His head is encased in a great helmet of bony plates, with two large eyes set forward for binocular vision. His jaws, slightly open in the slow rhythm of his breathing, show the dark gleam of his shearing plates. He is 40 feet from where you stand, and he is, in some quiet way, the most impressive thing you've ever seen. He's not as long as a modern blue whale, nor as fast as a great white shark, nor as toothy as a Cretaceous mosasaur. But he is the first time the ocean has produced a true bony predator, an animal whose lineage will much later give rise to all the fish you know. He glides on. He does not see you, or if he does not care. You're a strange figure on the shore. You're not in his world. In deeper water, his kind is the apex everywhere. Off the coast of what is now Morocco, in the warm shallows of the late Devonian Tethys, large Dunkleosteus patrol the reef margins, hunting the smaller placoderms and the early sharks. Off the coast of what is now Ohio, in the inland sea that covers much of the central United States, other Dunkleosteus specimens reach lengths of 20 feet or more. Some paleontologists working from incomplete skull material have suggested specimens up to 30 feet, although these estimates are debated. What is not debated is the bite. Modern engineering studies, modelling the jaw mechanics of Dunkleosteus from the preserved skull plates, suggest a bite force at the tip of the jaws of around 8,000 pounds per square inch. This is comparable to the bite force of a modern saltwater crocodile. The bite force at the back of the jaws where the shearing plates meet may have been even higher. Dunkleosteus could shear through bone, shell, armoured fish, almost anything in his ocean. He was, in the most literal sense, the apex of his world. He was also fast. The shape of his body, the placement of his fins, the proportions of his tail, all suggest a fast-swimming pelagic predator. He could probably accelerate from a slow cruise into a strike in a fraction of a second, much like a modern shark or barracuda. He was not a lurking ambush hunter. He was a pursuit predator, designed to chase down fish faster than him and bite them in half before they could escape. And then, as we've already noted, the late Devonian extinction takes him. The placoderms as a whole are decimated. Within a few million years of the boundary, the great armoured fish of the Devonian are gone. Their armour, which had been the foundation of their dominance, becomes a liability in the New World. Too heavy, too slow to grow, too expensive in metabolic terms. The lighter, scaleless or finely scaled fish that follow them, the ancestors of the modern sharks and the modern bony fish, will inherit the seas. The Devonian seas, in their late stretch, are full of Dunkleosteus and his relatives. There are also smaller arthrodires, sleeker placoderms, the first sharks of recognisable kind, the first ray-finned fish that will eventually produce all the modern teleosts, the first lobe-finned fish that will eventually crawl onto land and become the ancestors of all the tetrapods, including you. Then, around 375 million years ago, comes the late Devonian extinction. It is one of the lesser-known mass extinctions, but it is severe. It kills off most of the placoderms entirely, including Dunkleosteus and his relatives. It kills off many of the giant eurypterids. It cuts back the reefs. It reshapes marine ecosystems profoundly. The causes are debated. Most likely a combination of factors. The spread of the new land vegetation drew down atmospheric carbon dioxide and cooled the climate. Root systems weathered rocks and released nutrients into the seas, fueling algal blooms that depleted oxygen in the water. Ocean circulation shifted. Perhaps several smaller asteroid impacts contributed. Perhaps small volcanic episodes. Whatever the precise mix, the result is the same. The first great age of ocean giants ends, with the placoderms and the giant eurypterids fading into the fossil record. For a long time after the late Devonian, the ocean does not have giants on the same scale. The Carboniferous and Permian seas have plenty of life, but their largest predators are sharks of moderate size, perhaps 15 or 20 feet at most, and a few large lobe-finned fish. The eurypterids dwindle through the Carboniferous and Permian into smaller and smaller forms before disappearing entirely at the end of the Permian. The orthoconic nautiloids are long gone. The placoderms are long gone. It is not that the ocean is empty, it is rich in fact. The reefs of the Permian are spectacular, with sponge-built mounds and elaborate crinoid forests. The shallow seas are full of brachiopods and bivalves and ammonoids. The deep waters are full of small fish and sharks. But the great giants of the early Paleozoic are gone, and no new giants of comparable size have yet appeared. Then, at the end of the Permian, 252 million years ago, the largest mass extinction in Earth's history occurs. The Great Dying. We have walked through it before on this channel, if you have followed the long, sleepy line of sleep documentaries here. It wipes out more than 90% of marine species. It resets the rules of life in the seas almost entirely. In the aftermath of the Great Dying, the oceans rebuild themselves, and as part of that rebuilding, a brand new kind of giant appears. Not an arthropod, not a fish, not a cephalopod. A reptile. We're going to lift up briefly from our walk along the long beach of deep time and ask a small question before we plunge into the Triassic seas. The question is this: if this slow, calm way of wandering through deep time and the long memory of the sea helps you loosen your grip on the day, you're welcome to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening, on Spotify, on YouTube, or in your podcast app of choice. only if this kind of careful storytelling soothes you. There is no urgency. The decision can be as unhurried as a tide pulling away from a long beach at dawn. Let your breath slow. We're about to step into the warm Triassic Sea, where the first true marine reptile giants are about to appear, and where the ocean is going to begin its long love affair with reptiles that, in some ways, has never quite ended. The Triassic begins around 252 million years ago, in the silence after the Great Dying. We have walked across the Triassic land before. Tonight we are going to walk across its seas. The supercontinent Pangaea is still mostly fused. Around its eastern margin, between the upper arm and the lower arm of its long letter S shape, a wedge of warm, shallow water presses inland, the Tethys Sea. This Tethys is the cradle of the early Mesozoic marine revolution. It is here, along the Tethys coasts and islands, that whole new lineages of marine animals will rise from the ashes of the Permian collapse. Among them, in the early Triassic, a small group of land-living reptiles takes the same plunge that whales will eventually take much later. They return to the sea. They are not the first reptiles to swim in salt water. There have been semi-aquatic reptiles before. But in the early Triassic, the ichthyosaur lineage commits more fully than any predecessor. Within a few million years of the Permian extinction, ichthyosaurs are swimming in the warm Tethys with streamlined bodies, paddle-shaped limbs, and large eyes adapted for hunting in dim water. The early ichthyosaurs are modest in size, a few feet long, eel-shaped, hunting small fish. But they evolve quickly. By the Middle Triassic, around 240 million years ago, they have produced their first real giants. The largest is Cymbospondylus, who reaches 40 to 50 feet in length. He has a long, narrow snout, paddle-shaped flippers, a long muscular body, and a long tail that he uses to scull through the water. He is the largest predator in the Tethys. He hunts large fish, smaller marine reptiles, and even the early ammonoids that drift in his waters. He is also, in a striking way, the prototype of a body plan that will be reinvented over and over again across the next 200 million years. He looks remarkably like a modern dolphin in basic shape, although he is a reptile rather than a mammal. His ancestors had limbs designed for walking on land. His own limbs have become paddles. His head is small for his body. His tail does most of the propulsive work. He is, in evolutionary terms, an early experiment with a body plan that will be refined, lost, and reinvented many times. Imagine standing on a Triassic shore on the edge of the Tethys, around 240 million years ago. The land behind you is hot and dry. The water in front of you is warm and bright. A small group of nothosaurs, semi-aquatic marine reptiles with long necks and small heads, is hauled out on a low rocky outcrop nearby. They look almost seal-like in their posture, bodies stretched in the sun, flippers folded close to their sides. They are not large. They are perhaps 8 feet long. They are content. Out beyond the shallows in deeper water, a long shape moves slowly. You can see his back break the surface every few minutes, dark and smooth, as he rises to breathe. He is Cymbospondylus. He is more than 40 feet long. He is, in basic body plan, almost dolphin-shaped, although his fluke is vertical rather than horizontal, and his small head is full of conical teeth. He is, by the standards of his time, immense. He is larger than any modern dolphin. He is larger than any modern shark except the largest whale sharks. He is the size of a modern killer whale, and built much like one. He hunts in patient circling patterns, the way a large modern shark might. He cruises along the edges of coastal reefs, watching for the dense schools of small ammonoids and the schools of primitive ray-finned fish that gather in the warm shallows. When he sees a target, he accelerates with a slow, powerful sweep of his tail, and the strike, when it comes, is fast enough that the prey often does not register him until his jaws are closing. He does not hunt alone. Cymbospondylus, judging from the way his fossils are sometimes found in clusters, and from the social behaviour of his closest modern analogues, the deep-diving sperm whales and the apex orcas, probably moves in small, loose family groups. Mothers travel with their juveniles. Young males, once they reach independence, may travel alone or in small bachelor pods. Mature females may travel together in matrilineal groups. The exact social structure cannot be confirmed from fossils alone, but the parallels with modern marine apex predators suggest something similar. The tethys around him is full of life. The reefs are recovering from the Permian collapse, but they are recovering in new forms. Sponge-built bioherms rise from the seafloor. The first scleractinian corals, the same lineage that builds your modern tropical reefs, are establishing their first colonies. Crinoids, those long-stemmed sea lilies, sway in dense forests along the shelf edge. Brachiopods carpet the bottom. Ammonoids of many species are diversifying rapidly, their coiled shells gleaming as they drift in the warm currents. Among all of this, Cymbospondylus is the master predator. He has no rivals. The placodonts are slow shell crushers, no threat to him. The nothosaurs are smaller and more shoreline bound. The first plesiosaur ancestors are appearing, but are still small. The tethys is, for the moment, his sea. The Triassic seas continue to produce ichthyosaur giants across the period. By the late Triassic, the largest known ichthyosaur, Shastasaurus, may have reached more than 60 feet in length. Some recent estimates push him close to 70 feet. He would be the largest marine reptile ever known. He's the closest any marine reptile ever came in size to the modern blue whale. He's also strange. His head is small in proportion to his body. His mouth has few teeth, or none at all in some specimens. He appears to have been a suction feeder, hunting soft-bodied prey like squid and squid relatives in the dim waters of the upper twilight zone. He's a strange giant, a long sleek body with a tiny mouth, a quiet hunter of soft prey. Beside the ichthyosaurs in the Triassic seas, other marine reptiles diversify. The nothosaurs we just glimpsed on the rocky outcrop continue to thrive. The placodonts, those armoured shell crushers we have visited in the Triassic episode, are working over the shallow reefs. The first plesiosaurs, with their characteristic long necks and 4 flippers, are appearing at the end of the period. The first marine turtles, ancestors of the modern sea turtles, are testing the warm shallows. The tethys is full of new experiments. Then, at the end of the Triassic, 201 million years ago, the end Triassic extinction occurs. The placodonts vanish entirely. Many of the ichthyosaur lineages contract. The land-based Rauisuchians go extinct, opening the door for the dinosaurs to dominate the Jurassic. The marine reptile caste reshuffles, but the ichthyosaurs survive in reduced form. The plesiosaurs survive. The marine turtles survive. The ocean enters the Jurassic with most of its core marine reptile lineages intact, although thinned. Across the Jurassic, the ichthyosaurs continue to be the dominant fast-swimming hunters of the open sea. They are not as large as Shastasaurus. The Jurassic ichthyosaurs top out at perhaps 30 feet, but they are sleek and fast and effective. They hunt squid, fish, and smaller marine reptiles. The plesiosaurs diversify rapidly in the Jurassic into 2 main body plans. The first is the long-necked plesiosauroids, with their characteristic small heads on long, flexible necks. They look something like a body of a manatee with a swan's neck attached. The second is the short-necked pleosauroids, the plesiosaurs, with massive heads, short, thick necks, and powerful bodies. The plesiosaurs become the largest marine predators of the Jurassic. The biggest known plesiosaurs are extraordinary. Plesiosaurus funki from the late Jurassic of what is now Svalbard is estimated at more than 40 feet long, with a skull 6 feet across and serrated teeth nearly the size of bananas. Some specimens of Leopleurodon may have been comparable, although the exact size estimates are debated. Either way, the largest Jurassic pliosaurs are apex marine predators on the same scale as modern killer whales, and possibly larger. Imagine standing on a Jurassic shore. The water is warm and bright. A small herd of ichthyosaurs is moving offshore, their dorsal fins cutting the surface in slow rhythms. Closer to the beach, a long-necked elasmosaur, one of the long-necked plesiosaur lineages, is dipping his small head into the water, probably hunting small fish near the surface. He raises his head, swallows, dips again. Far out beyond all of this, in deep water, a single immense shape rises. He breaks the surface for a brief moment to take air. You see the broad arch back, the four long flippers extended slightly, the massive head with its long jaws. He is 40 feet long. He is the biggest predator in the Jurassic Ocean. He is Pliosaurus, or one of his close relatives. He dives. He's gone again. The Jurassic gives way to the Cretaceous, around 145 million years ago. The continents have continued to drift. The Atlantic Ocean is beginning to open. Pangaea is no longer a single continent. The climate is hot and humid, and sea levels are very high. Vast, shallow inland seas cover what are now landlocked interiors of North America, Africa, Australia, and Europe. The Cretaceous is, in many ways, the high point of the age of reptiles in the oceans. Across the Cretaceous, the marine reptile caste continues to evolve. The ichthyosaurs decline through the early Cretaceous and go extinct around 100 million years ago, before the end of the period. The plesiosaurs continue, both long-necked and short-necked forms. The pliosaurs decline somewhat, but new groups appear. The most important new group for our story is the mosasaurs. They evolve in the Middle Cretaceous from a lineage of land-living monitor lizards that returned to the sea, much as the ichthyosaurs had returned much earlier. They diversify rapidly across the late Cretaceous, becoming the dominant large marine predators of the period. The largest mosasaurs are extraordinary. Mosasaurus hoffmanni, the namesake of the group, reaches more than 50 feet in length. Tylosaurus, whose story we have told in another episode, runs nearly as large. Mosasaurs come in many sizes, from small reef hunters of 6 feet to open ocean apex predators of 50 feet. They have streamlined bodies, broad flat tails for sculling, and jaws lined with backward curving teeth designed for catching slippery prey. They eat fish, ammonites, smaller mosasaurs, even the occasional plesiosaur. The Cretaceous seas also have giant fish. Xiphactinus is a predatory bony fish, related to modern tarpon that reaches 20 feet in length. He has a streamlined silver body and a mouthful of sharp teeth. He hunts smaller fish, swallowing them whole. Some Xiphactinus fossils have been found with their last meal still preserved inside their stomachs. A smaller fish swallowed entire moments before the predator himself died. The Cretaceous has giant sharks too, including Cretoxurinae, sometimes called the Ginsu shark, who reaches more than 20 feet. He has serrated teeth and a powerful build. He competes with the mosasaurs for prey, hunting fish, and the occasional unwary marine reptile. And the Cretaceous has its giant turtle. Archelon is the largest sea turtle ever known. He reaches more than 15 feet long, with a leathery shell, broad flippers, and a beaked head suited for crushing ammonites and large jellyfish. He patrols the western interior seaway of what is now North America, drifting slowly through the shallow inland sea that splits the continent in two. Imagine standing on a Cretaceous shore. The water is warm and bright. The sky is full of pterosaurs. The western interior seaway stretches inland behind you, broad and shallow, full of marine reptiles and large fish. In the water in front of you, an Archelon turtle, 15 feet long, drifts slowly. He lifts his beaked head to take a breath, then dips again. Beyond him, a long sleek shape breaks the surface. A mosasaur, perhaps 30 feet, hunting. He spots something and dives. The water churns briefly. He returns to the surface with a smaller fish in his jaws. He swallows. He dives again. Far out beyond the mosasaur in deeper water, a great pliosaur cousin, one of the last of his lineage, is also hunting. He rises to breathe, his broad back gleaming, and submerges again. This is the high noon of the Mesozoic seas. multiple lineages of giant marine reptiles, giant predatory fish, giant marine turtles, giant sharks, all sharing the same ocean. Pterosaurs flying overhead, dinosaurs walking the coasts. It is in many ways the richest marine ecosystem the planet has ever supported. Let your awareness drift across this Cretaceous sea for a moment longer. In the bright shallows near the shore, schools of small fish dart in panicked formations as larger predators move past. A small mosasaur, perhaps 15 feet long, weaves through a kelp-like forest of marine plants, hunting smaller fish and squid in the dappled light. Higher in the water column, a pod of small plesiosaurs is moving slowly in a loose line, their long necks dipping in synchronized rhythm as they pick at jellyfish blooms drifting past. In the deeper open water beyond the shelf, the truly large predators move. A great pliosaur, one of the last of his lineage, swings his massive head from side to side as he cruises. Behind his head, the powerful body and 4 broad flippers move with slow, patient economy. He is 40 feet long. He's been alive for perhaps 20 years. He has hunted across half of the Atlantic in his time, following the migrations of giant fish and the spawning grounds of large squid. Along the bottom, in slightly deeper water, a Cameroceras shark slips through the murk, his pale belly faintly visible from above as he rolls slightly in the current. He is 20 feet long, sleek, serrated-toothed, ancient in lineage. He is one of the great pelagic sharks of the Cretaceous, a near analogue to the modern great white in body plan and hunting style. In the warmest reef sections, brilliant coral gardens spread across the seafloor. The corals here are scleractinians, the same group that builds your modern tropical reefs, but the species are different. Around the corals, a riot of small fish in patterns and colours that your modern eyes would not quite recognise. Bright reef squid jet between coral heads. Small turtles, ancestors of modern sea turtles, glide past. The Cretaceous reef is, in many ways, the prototype of the modern coral reef, scaled up and populated with marine reptiles instead of marine mammals. It is a beautiful world. It is also, in 2.5 million more years from this moment, going to end. Then, 66 million years ago, the asteroid hits. The end Cretaceous extinction is famous. It is the one most people know about. The Chicxulub asteroid, more than 6 miles wide, strikes the shallow sea of what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The impact releases as much energy as 100 million atomic bombs going off in a single instant. Ejecta is thrown high into the atmosphere. Wildfires sweep across continents. A massive tsunami radiates out across the world's oceans. Then, in the long months and years that follow, dust and sulfur from the impact darken the sky. Photosynthesis collapses. Food chains shatter. The non-avian dinosaurs go extinct. So do the pterosaurs. So do the mosasaurs. So do the plesiosaurs. So does Archelon. So does Zephactinus. So does Cretoxohyena. In the seas, an enormous proportion of the large marine animals are gone within years to decades of the impact. The ocean that comes out of the end Cretaceous extinction is a poorer ocean, by the standard of large predators. The ichthyosaurs are long gone, the plesiosaurs are gone, the mosasaurs are gone, the pliosaurs are gone, the dominant marine reptile lineages of the Mesozoic have all vanished. In their place, slowly, new lineages will rise. The world enters the Cenozoic, the era of mammals. Across the Paleocene and early Eocene, the seas slowly rebuild. Bony fish diversify. The first sea cows appear, descendants of land mammals that have returned to the water to graze on seagrasses. The first true sea otters and pinnipeds, seals, sea lions, will eventually evolve later, and around 50 million years ago, in the early Eocene, a small group of land mammals takes the same plunge that the ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs took before them. They are the cetacean ancestors, a group of small hoofed mammals that begin to spend more and more time in shallow water, eventually committing fully to the sea. Across the next 20 million years, they will become the whales. The early whales are small, the first fully aquatic whales, the basilosaurids of the late Eocene, are perhaps 30 to 60 feet long. Basilosaurus himself, the namesake, reaches 60 feet, although he is slender for his length, more eel-shaped than the great whales of today. He has a long body, small flippers, and a streamlined head full of pointed teeth. He hunts other whales, large fish, and squid. He is the dominant marine predator of his moment. Across the Oligocene and Miocene, the whales continue to diversify. The two great modern lineages of cetaceans, the toothed whales, Odontoceti, including dolphins and sperm whales, and the baleen whales, Mystaceti, including the great filter feeders, split from a common ancestor around 30 million years ago. By the Miocene, both groups are well established, and around 23 million years ago in the early Miocene, a new shark appears. He is Otodus Megalodon, the megatooth shark. He is enormous. The largest specimens are estimated at 50 feet long, with a body mass of more than 50 tons. He is the largest predatory shark ever to have lived. He has triangular serrated teeth as long as a human hand. He hunts large prey, medium whales, dolphins, sea cows, large fish. Megalodon dominates the warm temperate seas of the world for more than 15 million years. He is the apex predator of the Miocene and Pliocene oceans. He is the apex predator of an ocean already full of cetaceans, of large sharks, of pinnipeds, of sea cows. He is, by some measures, the most fearsome marine predator the planet has ever produced. Then, around 3.5 million years ago in the late Pliocene, Megalodon goes extinct. The reasons are debated. The leading hypothesis ties his disappearance to a cooling climate that reduced his warm water habitat. Combined with the rise of the great filter-feeding baleen whales, who occupied the food sources Megalodon's prey depended on, and possibly competition from the new killer whales, which are smaller but more intelligent and more socially coordinated. Whatever the precise mix, Megalodon dwindles and is gone. His extinction marks the end of the age of Megalodon. The modern ocean rises from his bones, dominated for the first time in a very long time by mammals rather than by sharks or reptiles. The blue whale, the largest animal ever to have lived, evolves in this same window. He is here, in your modern world, still cruising the cold polar seas and the warm tropical breeding grounds. He is the latest of all the great ocean giants. We have walked then through more than 500 million years of ocean giants. We have met Anomalocaris in the Cambrian, Cameroceras in the Ordovician, the eurypterids and Dunkleosteus in the Devonian, the ichthyosaurs of the Triassic, the plesiosaurs and pliosaurs of the Jurassic, the mosasaurs and Cephactinus, and Cretoxyrhina, and Archelon of the Cretaceous, Basilosaurus of the Eocene, and Megalodon of the Miocene and Pliocene. We have seen the ocean grow giants, lose them, and grow new ones, and we have arrived tonight in the modern world, where the blue whale and the sperm whale and the orca and the great white still patrol the seas. Take a deep breath. Let your awareness rest for a moment on that long, slow procession of giants. The ocean has been very generous with size. It has again and again made things vast. It has also, again and again, taken them back. Now, gently, we're going to ask the impossible question. What if none of them had ever gone? What if the eurypterids of the Devonian were still walking the soft mud of warm estuaries, side by side with modern horseshoe crabs? What if Dunkleosteus were still cruising the cold shelves, his armoured face gleaming in the dim depths? What if Kimberspondylus and his ichthyosaur relatives were still hunting in temperate waters, their dorsal fins cutting the surface like dolphins? What if the great pliosaurs of the Jurassic were still rising for breath in the open Atlantic? What if the mosasaurs of the late Cretaceous were still apex predators in the warm Pacific? What if Megalodon were still circling the seamounts of the deep blue? What if all of them, all of these long-lost giants were still here, sharing the modern ocean with the blue whale and the sperm whale and the great white shark, The question is impossible. The species lived in different climates, different ocean chemistries, different ecosystems, separated by tens or hundreds of millions of years. The Devonian eurypterids needed warm, shallow seas with low oxygen and no large competitors. The Cretaceous mosasaurs needed warm shelf seas with abundant ammonite prey. The Megalodon needed warm, temperate waters and a rich whale prey base. None of these conditions match the modern world exactly. None of these animals could simply be inserted into our modern ocean and survive. But the imagining is calming. The imagining is what lets the daily mind let go. So we are going to imagine a gentle, impossible thought experiment. A modern coast tonight, where every giant the ocean has ever made is still here, where the rules of climate and chemistry and time have been relaxed just enough to let them all coexist peacefully in the same long shoreline. Let us walk this coast. You're standing on a beach. The tide is low. The moon is up. The air is warm. Behind you, modern cities glow in the distance. Roads, lights, satellites, all the markers of our actual century. The coast itself is recognizably modern. There is a parking lot near the beach. There is a small lighthouse on a distant point. But the water is different. Just at the edge of the surf, where modern crabs would normally be scuttling in the wet sand, you see, in the moonlight, the dark, glossy back of a small eurypterid. He is perhaps 2 feet long, much smaller than his great Devonian ancestors, but unmistakably a sea scorpion. Segmented body, jointed legs, long curved tail. He's scavenging on a dead fish that has washed up. Beside him, a horseshoe crab is doing the same thing. They share the dead fish without fighting. They have evolved, in this gentler timeline, to coexist. You step back from the surf. You look out across the open water. A small herd of ichthyosaurs is moving offshore. Their dorsal fins cut the surface in a slow line. Perhaps a dozen animals, each 12 to 15 feet long. They are the descendants of the great Triassic ichthyosaurs, smaller now, adapted to colder modern waters, but still recognizably their kind. Streamlined bodies, paddle-shaped flippers, long, narrow snouts. They hunt in pods, like modern dolphins. They breathe in the same slow rhythm. Beside them, in deeper water, you see a long-necked plesiosaur lifting his head, briefly out of the water to look around. He's small by Mesozoic standards, perhaps 15 feet long. He's one of the last remaining plesiosaur lineages, surviving in this gentler timeline as a coastal cold water fisher, much like a modern cormorant but vastly larger. He dips his head back in, drifts, surfaces again. Further out, perhaps half a mile offshore, you see a dark fin rise from the water. It is a mosasaur. He is perhaps 30 feet long. He cruises at the surface for a moment, breathes, dives. He is, in this gentler timeline, the apex predator of the temperate Atlantic. He hunts the same things the great whites hunt in our actual world: seals, large fish, the occasional unwary smaller mosasaur. The two lineages share the niche. Far beyond the mosasaur, in the deep blue water past the continental shelf, a Megalodon shark patrols. You cannot see him from the beach. He is too far out, but you know he is there. In this gentler timeline, Megalodon survived the cooling climate by adapting to slightly cooler waters and slightly larger prey. He is still here. He's somewhere out beyond the shelf, hunting the largest of the modern whales, sharing the deep ocean with sperm whales and orcas in an uneasy three-way apex coexistence. Let us walk along this gentler coastline for a while. You move slowly along the wet sand at the surf line. The eurypterid you saw earlier is still there, working at the dead fish in the foam. He pays no attention to you. You can see his segmented back in close detail now. The dark, iridescent plates, the careful jointed legs, the long curved tail held arched over his back. He is 2 feet long, perhaps slightly more, and he is, in this gentler timeline, a familiar sight on temperate beaches. Children grow up watching for him in tide pools, the way children in your actual world watch for crabs. He has been domesticated by familiarity. He is no longer a monster of deep time. He is a beach companion. Further along the beach, a horseshoe crab passes him in the surf. The two animals, both surviving descendants of much larger Devonian ancestors, ignore each other completely. They have been sharing tide pools for hundreds of millions of years in this gentler timeline. They have, in some quiet way, made peace. You stop and crouch in the sand for a moment. The surf foams around your bare feet. The water is warm. The eurypterid moves a little closer to investigate, his many eyes catching the moonlight. He pauses, perhaps a foot from your toes. Then he loses interest. You're not food. You're not a threat. You're simply something else on the beach. You stand and walk further along the wet sand. The moon climbs slightly higher in the sky. The pod of ichthyosaurs offshore has moved into closer water now, perhaps 300 feet from the beach. You can hear them breathing as they surface, a quiet whoosh, then a small gentle splash as they dip again. They are not particularly worried about the shore. They are hunting schools of small fish in the cooler nighttime shallows. Their dorsal fins cut the water in slow, elegant lines. The pliosaur you saw earlier is closer too. He has drifted into the slightly deeper water just beyond the surf line, perhaps 100 yards out. His long neck rises out of the water briefly to look around. He sees you on the beach. He's not alarmed. He has seen humans many times. In this gentler timeline, the great long-necked pliosaurs are protected coastal animals across most of the northern hemisphere. Their long migrations from cold polar fishing grounds to warmer breeding bays are tracked by satellite tags. Children draw them in school. There are picture books about them. He dips his head back in. He drifts. Beyond him, the mosasaur fin you saw earlier has moved further out. He's hunting in deeper water now, half a mile from the shore. You can no longer see him. He is, in this gentler timeline, the dominant large predator of the temperate continental shelves. He has co-evolved with humans for a long time. He has learned, by long careful generations, to avoid coastal swimmers, fishing nets, shipping lanes. He is not a friend exactly, but he is not the danger that an unfamiliar large predator would be in our actual timeline. He's part of the cultural landscape. Coastal communities have a quiet relationship with him. They watch his migration patterns. They name him in their local mythologies. They mourn him when he dies, just as they mourn the death of a particularly old great white in our actual timeline. Further out still, beyond the continental shelf, the Megalodon you imagined patrols. He is invisible from the shore. He is too far out, too deep. But you know he is there. In this gentler timeline, Megalodon is the rarest of the great surviving marine animals. There are perhaps a few thousand of them left in the world's oceans, protected by international treaty, tracked by deep-sea acoustic monitoring stations. They are vast. They are ancient. They are mostly seen, in the gentler timeline modern world, only by deep-sea submersible expeditions and by the occasional researcher with a long satellite tag program. They are in every way the great living relic of the Miocene, and beyond all of these, in the truly deep waters of the open ocean, the blue whale still sings. He is still the largest. He has not been displaced by any of the returning Mesozoic predators. He is too big to be threatened by even the largest mosasaur or megalodon. He swims his slow migrations. He sings his deep, low songs to the cold polar dark. He is, in this gentler timeline, the king of all the gentler timeline oceans. You stand on the beach, you watch the long procession, the eurypterid in the surf, the ichthyosaur pod just beyond the breakers, the pliosaur drifting in the deeper water, the unseen mosasaur in the open continental shelf, the unseen megalodon beyond the shelf, the unseen blue whale in the deepest water, singing. It is, in its impossible way, a beautiful coastline. Let us slow down here. Let us not leave this gentler timeline coast too quickly. Imagine a single woman who lives, in this gentler timeline, in a small wooden house at the edge of a coastal cliff, perhaps 200 miles north of where we have been standing on the beach. She's a marine biologist in her early 60s, a widow with grown children who live in distant cities. She has spent her working life studying the surviving Mesozoic marine reptile populations of the temperate North Atlantic. She is, in her gentler timeline world, a respected expert on pliosaur migration. We're going to spend a slow day with her. Her morning begins before dawn. She wakes in the soft grey light, makes coffee in her small kitchen, and stands at the kitchen window watching the sea. The window faces east. The sky over the water is just beginning to lighten. The tide is rising. Far below the cliff, the surf breaks in slow lines along a narrow beach. She drinks her coffee. She watches the horizon. She's looking, as she does every morning, for the dorsal fins of the local ichthyosaur pod. They have been resident in this stretch of coast for the entire decade she has lived here. There are perhaps 15 of them, mostly females and their juveniles, with a few transient males in the breeding season. She knows most of them individually by the patterns of scars on their fins. This morning she sees them. 3 small dark fins cut the surface perhaps 400 yards offshore. The pod is hunting in the cooler pre-dawn shallows where the small fish gather. She watches for several minutes. The fins move in slow synchronized lines. They are working a school of mackerel. They surface in patient rhythm every minute or so, then dive again. She smiles. She has watched this same pod hunt, this same stretch of coast nearly every morning for 10 years. After her coffee, she walks down the long wooden stair that descends from her clifftop yard to the beach. The stair is 217 steps. She knows the count exactly. She takes them slowly, one hand on the rail, her bare feet making soft sounds on the worn wood. At the bottom, she walks out onto the wet sand. The tide is rising. The surf line is close to the cliff base. She walks south along the beach, her bare feet leaving small prints in the firm sand. She stops at a tide pool. The pool is one of her favourites. It is about 10 feet across, perhaps 2 feet deep at the centre. The morning sun has not yet reached it directly, so the water is still cool and dim. In the pool, she sees what she always sees, a small eurypterid, perhaps 18 inches long, moving slowly across the bottom. He is one of the local descendants of the great Devonian sea scorpions, dwarfed by long evolution to a niche where he can coexist with modern fish. His back is dark iridescent green, with subtle bands of paler colour along the segments. His tail is held in a slow curve over his back. His many eyes catch the dim morning light. Beside him, a horseshoe crab is doing what horseshoe crabs have done for hundreds of millions of years. Several small fish, perhaps minnows or small sticklebacks, dart between the rocks at the pool's edge. A single sea anemone, dark red and slow, sits at the bottom near the eurypterid. She watches the pool for several minutes. She's been watching it for 10 years. It has barely changed. The eurypterid here is not the same individual he was a decade ago, of course. Eurypterids of his size live perhaps 4 or 5 years. But the population is stable. The species has been resident in this stretch of coast for as long as anyone has been keeping records, which in the gentler timeline goes back several centuries. She moves on along the beach. After perhaps a mile, she reaches a wooden boardwalk that leads up to a small research station, a low building of weathered cedar shingles set among salt-tolerant grasses. This is her field office. She works here 3 days a week, processing data, training her 2 graduate students, occasionally hosting visiting researchers. This morning her students are already at the boat. They are preparing for a day at sea, tracking the ichthyosaur pod's movements with their hydrophones and their satellite tags. She joins them. The boat is a 30-foot research vessel, sturdy, weathered, well-maintained. It has a small cabin, a flat working deck at the stern, a rack of acoustic recording equipment along one rail. They cast off at 7 in the morning. The sea is calm, the wind is light, the sky is mostly clear. They run north, parallel to the coast, for perhaps 2 hours. By mid-morning, they are above the deeper water beyond the continental shelf edge. Here, the ichthyosaur pod has spread out to hunt over a wider area. The biologist's lead student deploys the hydrophone. They listen for several minutes. The hydrophone picks up the high-frequency clicks and whistles that the ichthyosaurs use to coordinate their hunting, much like modern dolphins. The students record the calls. They have been building a catalogue of individual vocal signatures for several years. While the hydrophone is recording, the biologist herself watches the water. She's done this for 40 years now. She knows what to look for. After perhaps 20 minutes, she sees what she's waiting for. A long, pale shape rises gently to the surface, perhaps 50 yards from the boat. A long neck appears, lifts, dips. It is a plesiosaur. He's perhaps 15 feet long, with a small head on his long, graceful neck and 4 broad flippers folded close to his body. He looks at the boat for a moment with his small dark eye, decides they are not interesting, and dips back beneath the surface. She knows this plesiosaur. He's one of the regular residents of this stretch of coast. He carries a small satellite tag that her team applied 3 years ago. The tag transmits his position once a day. She has the records of every place he has been since the tag was attached. She makes a small note in her field journal. Plesiosaur sighting, 10:37, position recorded, animal appears healthy, no surface injuries observed. The morning passes. Around noon, the boat moves further offshore, out beyond the shelf edge into deeper water. Here, in the cooler open water, larger marine animals occasionally surface. The boat is too small to encounter the great mosasaurs, who tend to stay further offshore and deeper. But the biologist has, twice in her career, seen a mosasaur fin from this boat. Each time was an event she remembered for years. This morning she sees no mosasaur, but she does see, perhaps a mile to the east, the distant blow of a sperm whale. She watches the blow for several minutes through her binoculars. The sperm whale is a large male, judging from the size and pattern of the blow. He's hunting in the deep water, diving to perhaps half a mile or more to find giant squid. She makes another note. The afternoon is spent on more routine work: hydrophone recordings, sample collection, logging position data, coordinating with another research boat operating 50 miles to the south, which is tracking a different ichthyosaur pod. The students take their turns at the helm. The biologist mostly sits at the stern, journal in her lap, watching the water. By late afternoon, the wind has picked up slightly. The waves are higher. They turn the boat back toward shore. As they approach the coast, the biologist sees in the deeper water just beyond the shelf edge a sudden burst of activity at the surface. Fish are jumping, seabirds are diving, something large is hunting below. She raises her binoculars. After a moment she sees it. A long dark fin, dorsal and triangular, cutting the surface in slow patient lines. It is a mosasaur. He's perhaps 30 feet long. He's working a school of large fish in the deeper water. She watches him for perhaps 2 minutes. Then he dives and is gone. She makes a note. Mosasaur sighting, 3:18, deep water beyond shelf edge, animal hunting actively, no identifying marks observed. She has not seen a mosasaur from this boat in 14 months. It is a quiet, important event in her year. They return to harbour as the sun sinks. The biologist helps her students unload the equipment, then walks the long stretch back along the beach to her cliff stair, climbs the 217 steps, and lets herself into her quiet house. She's tired. She makes a simple dinner. She sits at her kitchen window again, watching the sea darken. She does not turn on the inside lights for a long time. She wants to see the water. After her dinner, she takes out a small handheld receiver and a pair of headphones. She has a hydrophone permanently moored a few hundred yards offshore, transmitting via radio link to this receiver. She turns it on. She puts on the headphones. The sound that fills her ears is the deep, slow song of a blue whale, far out beyond the continental shelf, perhaps 50 miles offshore, perhaps further. The song is low. It is patient. It carries through the water for hundreds of miles. She closes her eyes. In the gentler timeline, the blue whale is still here. The great Mesozoic predators have returned, and they share the ocean with him, but he is still the largest of them all. He has not been displaced. His songs still carry through the deep water. He still cruises his long migrations between the polar feeding grounds and the tropical breeding waters. She listens to him sing for perhaps an hour. Then, gently, she turns off the receiver. She removes the headphones. She sits in the dark by her window for a while longer. The Megalodon, she knows, is also out there. She's never seen one. Almost no one has. The megalodons of the gentler timeline are deep water animals, rare, protected, monitored by submersible expeditions every few years. There are perhaps 3,000 of them left in the world's oceans. They live mostly in the deep blue waters of the open ocean basins, hunting the largest of the modern whales and the great squid of the bathypelagic zone. She has read every paper that has ever been published on the modern megalodon populations. She has watched every documentary, but she has never seen one in person. It is something she has long since accepted she may never see. The megalodons do not visit shallow coasts. They are too large, too specialized, too cautious of human activity. She is not bothered by this. It is enough, in some quiet way, to know that they are out there. It is enough that her grandchildren will inherit a world that still contains them. She goes to bed early. The window stays open. The surf below is loud enough to hear faintly through the cliff air. She lies in the dark and listens to the slow waves, and behind them she imagines she can still hear the deep, low song of the blue whale, although her hydrophone is off. She falls asleep. This is one day. There will be tomorrow. The pod will be in the shallows again at dawn. The eurypterid will be in the tide pool. The plesiosaur with the satellite tag will be somewhere in this coastal range. The mosasaurs will be out beyond the shelf, mostly invisible, occasionally surfacing. The unseen megalodons will be in their deep blue water somewhere in the open ocean. The gentler timeline ocean will keep on holding all of them, day by day, generation by generation. It will not be perfect. There will be losses. There will be storms. There will be the slow pressures of warming water and acidification and human shipping noise, even in this gentler world. But the giants will be there. They will not all be gone. And beyond all of these, in the truly deep waters, the blue whale still sings. He is still the largest of them all. He has not been displaced by the return of the great Mesozoic predators. He is too big to be threatened by any of them. He swims his slow, long migrations from polar feeding grounds to tropical breeding grounds, his deep, low songs reaching for hundreds of miles through the water. You stand on the beach, in this gentler timeline, and you watch the long procession of giants. The eurypterid in the surf, the ichthyosaur herd offshore, the pliosaur lifting his head, the mosasaur fin cutting the water, the unseen megalodon out beyond the shelf, the blue whale in the deepest waters singing. What would this world feel like in human cultural terms? It would, of course, be deeply strange. The human relationship to the sea would be different. Beach culture would not exist in quite the form we know. Open water swimming would be much more dangerous, although coastal communities would have developed protocols and protected zones, much as we already have for shark-prone waters. Fishing fleets would compete with the great marine reptiles for tuna and squid. Shipping lanes would route around known megalodon hunting grounds. But human civilization would still exist. Our species is adaptable. We would have grown up alongside these giants. They would be part of our cultural imagination, the way whales and sharks are. There would be ichthyosaur conservation societies. There would be mosasaur sanctuaries. There would be megalodon documentaries on streaming services, narrated perhaps by David Attenborough's great-grandson. Children would learn the names of all the great marine lineages in school, the eurypterids in the tide pools, the ichthyosaurs offshore, the plesiosaurs in the cold bays, the mosasaurs on the warm shelves, the pliosaurs in the open ocean, the megalodon in the deep blue, the blue whale in the polar feeding grounds, it would be in many ways a richer world, not necessarily a better one, not necessarily a happier one. Human swimmers would die more often, coastal economies would be more constrained, but the imaginative life of our species would be larger. We would know, viscerally, that the ocean has produced and held many kinds of giants. We would not feel that the great whales were the only ones, or perhaps we would feel exactly that. Perhaps, growing up alongside so many lineages of giant marine animals, we would take them for granted. Perhaps we would feel less wonder. Perhaps the magic that we feel in our actual timeline, on hearing of a Megalodon tooth in a museum, or seeing a blue whale on a documentary, comes precisely from the rarity of the experience. We do not know. The thought experiment cannot be answered, only imagined. Take a deep breath. Let your awareness rest in this gentler timeline for a moment longer. The eurypterid is still in the surf. The ichthyosaur herd is still moving offshore. The pliosaur is still dipping his head. The mosasaur is still cutting the surface. The Megalodon is still patrolling the deep. The blue whale is still singing. They are all here, in your imagination, in a single, long, modern coastline at low tide under a high moon. We're going to step out of the gentler timeline now, gently, and ask the harder question. Why did each of these lineages, in our actual timeline, go away? The eurypterids declined because the rise of bony fish in the late Devonian created competitors and predators that the eurypterids could not match. The fish were faster, smarter, more flexible. They hunted small eurypterids and outcompeted the larger ones for prey. By the end of the Permian, the last eurypterids were gone. The placoderms, including Dunkleosteus, declined because the late Devonian extinction hit them especially hard. They were a relatively young lineage at the time, with less genetic diversity than older groups. The combined stresses of climate cooling, ocean anoxia, and possible asteroid impacts pushed their populations below recovery thresholds. By the early Carboniferous, the placoderms were essentially gone. The ichthyosaurs of the Mesozoic declined more slowly. Their numbers thinned through the Cretaceous, possibly due to competition from the newer mosasaurs and from the rising bony fish, possibly due to climate shifts that disrupted their preferred prey. The last ichthyosaurs went extinct around 100 million years ago, well before the end Cretaceous asteroid. The plesiosaurs and mosasaurs both went extinct at the end Cretaceous, along with the non-avian dinosaurs, in the impact winter that followed the Chicxulub asteroid. The marine ecosystem collapse killed off most of their prey, and with their prey gone, they had nothing to eat. They starved out within years to decades of the impact. Megalodon, much later, declined as the Pliocene climate cooled and the great filter-feeding baleen whales rose. His prey base shifted in ways that did not favour him. The rise of the killer whale, more agile and social, may have added further pressure. By 3.5 million years ago, he was gone. Each extinction has its own particular causes. None of them happened because the ocean was less generous, or because the world was suddenly too small. Each happened because the conditions that allowed the particular giant to exist shifted in ways the giant could not match. The pattern, if there is one, is that giants are vulnerable. Their long lifespans, their slow reproduction, their dependence on rich prey bases, their need for stable environments. All of these traits make them more sensitive to large changes than smaller, more flexible species. When climates shift, when oceans acidify, when food chains collapse, the giants tend to go first. This is a pattern we should hold gently. It applies to our actual ocean too. The modern blue whale, the modern sperm whale, the modern great white shark, the modern whale shark. All of them are vulnerable to the changes our own species is now causing in the seas: warming water, acidification, plastic pollution, shipping noise, overfishing of their prey base. The pattern of vulnerable giants does not belong only to the deep past. It is happening in slow motion in our own century. This is not a lecture. It is a quiet observation. Take a deep breath. The modern ocean still has giants. We should hold them with care. we're going to lift up briefly, one last time from our walk through deep time, and let our awareness return to the present coast. You're standing again on a modern beach. The tide is still low, the moon is still up, the air is still warm. The water in front of you is the actual modern Atlantic or the actual modern Pacific or whichever sea is nearest your own home in the world. The gentler timeline is not real. It was a thought experiment. But the modern sea is real, and it still has giants in it. Somewhere out beyond the breakers, a blue whale may be moving slowly through the dark. He is more than 100 feet long. He weighs as much as 30 elephants. He's the largest animal that has ever existed on this planet. He is alive, in your own century, right now, somewhere in the world's oceans. A sperm whale may be diving more than a mile down to hunt giant squid in the abyssal dark. He has the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived. He communicates with his pod across enormous distances through complex coders of clicks. He is, in some quiet way, the closest thing the ocean has to a sentient peer. A great white shark may be patrolling a temperate coastline, slow and patient, watching seal colonies from below. He is the apex predator of his region. He has been doing this job in roughly the same form for 16 million years. A whale shark, somewhere in the warm tropics, may be drifting through plankton-rich waters, his enormous mouth open, filtering food from the water. He is the largest fish in the world today. These are the giants we have. They are remarkable. They are not the giants we have lost, but they are giants nonetheless. And they are still here tonight in the same world as you. The blue whale in particular deserves a slow moment of attention. He is the largest animal that has ever existed. Not the largest marine animal. The largest animal, full stop. The longest dinosaur. The largest ichthyosaur. The largest mosasaur. The largest pliosaur, the largest Megalodon. None of them are as large as a fully grown blue whale. He is the heaviest, the longest, the most massive vertebrate in the entire fossil record. And he is alive. He is alive in your century. He is alive in the actual ocean tonight. If you are listening to this near a coast, on the western edge of any continent that meets a deep cold ocean, there is some non-zero chance that a blue whale is swimming at this very moment, within 50 miles of where you lie in bed. He is not in trouble immediately. His populations are recovering from the catastrophic depletion of 20th century whaling. He is still threatened by ship strikes and warming oceans and changes in his krill prey base. But he is here. He is breathing, in the same world you're breathing in. He is the latest of all the great ocean giants, and he is alive. That is worth one slow, careful breath. You can be glad of that. The ocean has been generous, even with everything it has taken back. It has left us in this moment with some of the largest living animals it has ever produced. Take a deep breath. Let your body settle deeper into whatever supports you. The walk along the long beach of deep time is over. We have met the giants of the Cambrian and the Ordovician, the Devonian and the Carboniferous, the Triassic and the Jurassic and the Cretaceous, the Eocene and the Miocene and the Pliocene. We have imagined, briefly, a world in which none of them had ever gone. We have honoured the giants we have lost and the giants we still have. For tonight, we have walked enough. Outside your window, the actual world is doing what it does. Maybe a streetlight is humming. Maybe a far-off car is going somewhere. Maybe a tree is rustling. None of the long-lost giants are out there in our actual timeline. The Devonian eurypterids are gone. The Triassic ichthyosaurs are gone. The Cretaceous mosasaurs are gone. The Miocene Megalodon is gone. But here, in the soft theatre of your closed eyes, they are still walking and swimming and gliding and singing. They will, for as long as you wish, keep walking and swimming through the warm, gentler timeline sea. The eurypterid is still in the surf. The ichthyosaur herd is still moving offshore. The plesiosaur is still dipping his head. The mosasaur is still cutting the surface. The megalodon is still patrolling the deep. The blue whale is still singing. The great Dunkleosteus is still gliding past the continental shelf. The giant pliosaur is still rising for breath beyond the horizon. The giant orthoconic cephalopod in this impossible imagined coast is still drifting in the deeper water beyond the reef. They're all here, in your imagination tonight, on a single long impossible coastline at low tide under a high moon. Tonight, in your room, you are with them. Let your breath slow. Let the small last edges of your day go. Let the long memory of the ocean settle around you, gentle and patient as the tide. The sea has held giants for more than 500 million years. It still holds some of them now. It will, in some form, hold giants for as long as it remains a sea. For tonight we have walked enough. Sleep well tonight, traveller. Good night.